Welcome to a universe full of stories. So the classic hero's journey is, well, by its very nature, it's this incredibly comforting narrative blueprint, right? We all basically know the beats.
Yeah, it feels inevitable. Like it's just baked into how we tell stories.
Right, the young, noble heir faces some terrible, unjust tragedy, discovers a hidden power within themselves.
Is forced out into the harsh wilderness.
Exactly, rallies a righteous army, and then finally returns to reclaim their rightful throne and, usher in a golden era of peace.
And I mean, more importantly, it feels morally just. As audiences, we really like our saviors to be clearly defined.
We totally do.
We want them wrapped in this neat little bow of moral superiority, making all the right choices for all the right reasons.
But, and this is why we're here today, that comforting blueprint completely shatters when we step into the universe we're exploring in this deep dive. Like, it is taken, set on fire, and just scattered across a barren desert.
Oh, absolutely destroyed.
So, our mission today is to figure out, how does a young man who was literally bred for thousands of years to be a superhuman being, trained by the absolute greatest tactical and analytical minds in the universe?
A guy who ultimately gains the power to literally see all possible futures.
Right. How does that person end up wandering blind into a wasteland only to return years later and die as a ragged street preacher, desperately protesting his own legacy?
It is the ultimate agonizing paradox. When we look at his life, Paul Atreides, we aren't just looking at the rise of an emperor.
No, it's way darker than that.
Way darker. We're examining the terrifying, crushing burden of absolute foresight. We are dissecting the sheer existential danger of, well, what happens when you combine unstoppable religious fanaticism with absolute, unchecked political power?
And by the end of this deep dive, the architecture of what is basically the ultimate cautionary tale will be remarkably and terrifyingly clear to you.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
So let's just start with the architecture that actually produced him. Because for a listener who already knows the political chessboard, House Atreides, the Harkonnens, the Emperor, the truly fascinating layer isn't even the politics of the noble houses.
No, it's the biology.
Right, the biology. The Bene Gesserit breeding program. Because Paul wasn't an accident. He was the culmination of a massive, multi-generational genetic engineering project.
A project spanning 10,000 years.
10,000 years. Just wrap your head around that.
It's staggering. I mean, the Bene Gesserit sisterhood operates entirely in the shadows. They are essentially the puppet masters of the universe's genetic destiny. For 10 millennia, they've just been carefully pruning bloodlines, orchestrating marriages, and directing the flow of human reproduction across thousands of planets.
And the goal of this staggering timeline is a single being, right? The Kwisatz Haderach.
Right.
A male who could access both male and female genetic memories. But we really need to look at how they planned to use him. Because they didn't want an independent god.
No, not at all. They wanted a controlled deity.
Exactly.
You see, the mechanics of Bene Gesserit memory are restricted by sex. The Reverend Mothers can look inward and access the memories, the lived experiences of all their female ancestors. But there's this place within the genetic memory that terrifies them.
The void.
Right, a psychic void they just cannot look into, which is the male line. So the Kwisatz Haderach, which roughly translates to the shortening of the way, would be a male who could bridge space and time, accessing the entirety of human history, both male and female.
So he would basically possess infinite data. He'd be the ultimate oracle.
Exactly, but an oracle on a leash, that's the key. The Sisterhood's mandate was to quietly guide humanity toward a stabilized, universal peace. And to do that, they needed the ultimate tool.
The Kwisatz Haderach.
Right. He was meant to be their puppet, placed on the Imperial throne, allowing the Bene Gesserit to dictate the future of humanity without ever actually holding the outward symbols of power.
Because outward power makes a ruler vulnerable.
Exactly.
And this is where their flawless 10,000-year math just hits a massive brick wall of human emotion.
Oh, totally.
So Lady Jessica, Paul's mother, is given very explicit orders. She's a Bene Gesserit, concubine to Duke Leto Atreides. The Sisterhood commands her to bear Leto a daughter.
Just a daughter. That was the whole plan.
Right. And that daughter is then scheduled to marry a Harkonnen heir, and then their offspring would finally be the Kwisatz Haderach. But Jessica just flat out disobeys.
She does?
She gives Leto the son he deeply desires. she gives birth to Paul.
And, the audacity of that choice is just staggering. When you break down the mechanics of what the Bene Gesserit actually do, they control the microscopic functions of their own bodies.
Right, it's not a roll of the dice.
No, they literally decide the sex of their children through internal cellular manipulation. So Jessica's act wasn't some biological accident, it was a conscious, deliberate rebellion.
It's incredibly cynical when you really look at their methodology. I mean, it's like trying to bake the universe's most complex souffle on a 10,000-year timer.
That is a great way to put it.
Right. Like you control the oven, you measure every microscopic ingredient, you regulate the ambient temperature down to the decimal point, but then you leave the final, most crucial step up to the absolute obedience of human emotion. Like, why gamble millennia of careful, calculating genetic pruning on one person's romantic feelings?
Well, the underlying mechanism of their failure there is hubris. Just pure, unadulterated hubris.
Yeah.
It perfectly illustrates the central flaw of any system that tries to mathematically calculate and perfectly control human behavior. The Bene Gesserit actually believed their psychological indoctrination was stronger than fundamental human connection.
They thought they had engineered the humanity out of her.
Exactly. By defying them, Jessica didn't just ruin a timeline. She unleashed a wild card.
A huge wild card.
She ensured that this Messiah, this Kwisatz Haderach, might arrive a full generation early. And crucially, he would arrive not as an indoctrinated pawn of the sisterhood, but with the uncontainable, fierce independence and loyalty of an Atreides.
And you really see that terrifying potential immediately in how Paul is educated. Like, the convergence of skills he receives is historically unprecedented.
Oh, it's wild.
Yeah. Jessica is secretly training him in the Bene Gesserit Prana Bindu disciplines. So, absolute nerve and muscle control, hyper-observation, the use of the voice to physically compel obedience.
While simultaneously, he's absorbing elite military strategy and lethal combat techniques from Gurney Halleck and Duncan Idaho.
Who are like two of the deadliest fighters in the known universe.
Exactly. But the real catalyst, the thing that makes Paul so incredibly dangerous, is his mind. He is being trained as a mentat.
Which is such a crucial detail we need to unpack, because in this universe, thinking machines and artificial intelligence have been violently eradicated.
Right, permanently banned by religious decree.
So the mentat is the human replacement, the human computer. And Thufir Hawat, the Atreides master of assassins, trains Paul to process these astronomical amounts of complex data, variables, and probabilities with just flawless, cold logic.
So just imagine putting all of that into a 15-year-old boy. It's terrifying.
The physical lethality of master swordsmen, the psychological manipulation of a Bene Gesserit witch, and the computational processing power of a supercomputer.
And Duke Leto just sees a political advantage, right? He just thinks, oh, great, I have an heir who can outthink our rivals.
Yeah, he doesn't see the whole picture, but Jessica knows the horrific truth. When Thufir confirms Paul's true mentat capabilities, she realizes Paul truly is the Kwisatz Haderach. He's arriving early and is completely outside their control.
And then this rogue variable is violently uprooted from Caladan, which is this lush, oceanic world, and thrust into the ultimate crucible.
Arrakis.
Right. The Emperor is terrified of Duke Leto's rising popularity, so he orchestrates a trap. He orders the Atreides to take over the fiefdom of Arrakis, the deadliest, harshest environment imaginable.
But before they even leave, the Bene Gesserit make a desperate attempt to assess the damage Jessica has done. A Reverend Mother administers the Gom Jabbar test to Paul.
And this isn't a test of strength, right? It's a test of humanity. Yeah, the mechanics of the test are brutal. A poison needle is held to his neck, and his hand is placed in a box that induces the sensation of literal flesh-incinerating agony.
Oh, man.
The animal instinct is to pull away from the pain, which would mean immediate death from the needle. But the human, according to the Bene Gesserit, can apply mental discipline to endure the pain for a higher purpose of survival.
And he passes.
He passes, proving he has the cognitive restraint required to house the powers he's inheriting.
But the move to Arrakis is where this abstract genetics program collides with weaponized sociology. Because the moment Paul arrives on the desert planet, the native Fremen look at him and immediately begin calling him Lias al-Gaib.
The voice from the outer world, the prophesied savior.
And this is where the mechanics of belief get really sinister. Because this is not some organic magical prophecy whispered by desert mystics that magically predicted Paul Atreides.
No, it is completely artificial.
The Missionary Protectiva.
Yes. So, centuries ago, the Bene Gesserit dispatched this specialized wing of social engineers to Arrakis, and a bunch of other harsh worlds too. Their singular mandate was to artificially seed fake religious prophecies tailored specifically to the local environment and culture.
It's astonishingly cynical. It's literally like a massive corporation secretly burying fake dinosaur bones in a barren desert, completely fabricated, just in case centuries later they might need to hastily open a theme park to save themselves from bankruptcy.
That's exactly what it is. They planted religious trigger words and archetypes.
Just to have them ready.
Right, it was a survival protocol. If a Bene Gesserit sister ever found herself stranded on a hostile world, she could recognize the linguistic markers of these pre-planted myths, present herself or her offspring as the fulfillment of that prophecy, and instantly weaponize the local population's faith to secure her own protection.
So think about the psychological trap Paul is walking into here. If the Fremen had been artificially programmed for centuries to worship a very specific set of criteria that Jessica knows exactly how to fulfill, how much of Paul's subsequent rise to power is actually based on his own merit?
Right.
And how much is just him pressing the pre-programmed psychological buttons of a heavily manipulated society?
And this is the exact existential nightmare Paul wrestles with. He recognizes the linguistic markers of the missionary Protectiva. He knows the prophecy is a lie.
Right, he's a mentat. He sees the math of it.
Exactly. But his physical environment is simultaneously triggering something profoundly real, something no one fully anticipated.
The spice.
The spice melange. It's everywhere on Arrakis. It's in the air, the food, the very dust they breathe. And this geriatric drug, which extends life and makes interstellar travel possible, acts as a massive psychoactive catalyst on Paul's unique genetics.
Constant exposure to the spice just sends his latent prescient abilities into absolute overdrives. The vague, prophetic dreams he experienced back on Caladan amplify into these waking, paralyzing nightmares.
His mind begins to slip the bonds of linear time. He starts seeing fragmented, terrifying visions of a massive, bloody jihad, a universal holy war fought in his name under the green and black banner of the Atreides.
And he also sees visions of a Fremen woman, Chasani, someone he has never even met.
Yeah.
While his mind is expanding across time, the trap in the present finally snaps shut. The Harkonnens, secretly backed by the Emperor's elite Sardaukar terror troops, launch a devastating coordinated attack on Arrakeen.
House Atreides falls, and we really have to examine the mechanism of that fall because it relies on breaking and supposedly unbreakable conditioning.
Dr. Yeah.
Yes, the trusted Atreides physician, Dr. Yeah, lowers the city's planetary shields and incapacitates Duke Leto.
But Yu isn't doing it out of greed or ambition, right?
No. He is bound by imperial conditioning, which supposedly makes it psychologically impossible to take a human life. But the Harkonnens broke that conditioning by capturing and torturing his wife.
Just brutal leverage.
The sheer psychological agony of that leverage shattered his programming. But crucially, out of a residual, profound loyalty to the Atreides, Yue leaves a specialized survival kit in an ornithopter. He gives Paul and Jessica a microscopic window to escape the slaughter and flee into the deep, unforgiving desert.
And that flight into the desert is the true inception of Paul's tragedy. Stripped of his army, his father, and his wealth, he realizes he is stepping directly into that pre-made suit of armor the Bene Gesserit left behind.
The myth of the Lisan al-Gaib is just waiting for him.
Right. So when he and Jessica finally connect with a Fremen siege, Paul makes this highly calculated linguistic and cultural pivot. He chooses a Fremen name, Muad'Dib, the name of the kangaroo mounts of Arrakis.
And you have to ask, why focus on the mounts? Why not take a name of power or dominance like a hawk or a worm?
Exactly. Yeah. Because he is desperately trying to anchor the legend to himself as a mortal, humble man. He wants to control the narrative.
He's terrified of the visions of billions burning in a holy war in his name. So his logic is basically, if I can just control the Fremen, if I can lead them as a man named Muad'Dib, I can steer them away from this bloody jihad.
But escaping the Harkonnens doesn't free Paul, does it? It actually forces him deeper into the very myth he's attempting to dismantle.
Yeah, to survive the brutality of the deep desert, he has to completely embrace the terrifying religious awe that is threatening to consume him.
It's just a brutal survival equation. He and his mother manage to survive encounters with the deadly Sardaukar, and they fully integrate into Fremen society. Paul's visions materialize into reality. He meets Chani, they fall deeply in love, and they have a child, a son named Leto.
Paul's integration is absolute at this point. He becomes a Fedaykin leader, drawing people to him with undeniable charisma and tactical brilliance. But his prescience is still fragmented.
Right, he's getting glimpses, but not the whole picture.
Exactly. He's consuming massive amounts of spice just through daily Fremen life, and his powers are swelling. Every action he takes draws more awe from the native population, who see him fulfilling every microscopic detail of their prophecies.
So the pressure is mounting, the visions of the jihad are getting closer, and he realizes he needs absolute clarity. The fragmented visions just aren't enough to navigate the labyrinth of timelines ahead.
No.
So he takes the ultimate, potentially lethal risk. He drinks the water of life.
And we really need to explain the sheer biological terror of the water of life. It is a highly potent, highly toxic liquid exhalation of a drowning sandworm.
That was lovely.
Oh, it's awful. In Bene Gesserit tradition, it is only consumed by women attempting the agonizing transmutation to become a Reverend Mother. They must alter the poison at a molecular level within their own bodies.
And many women die screaming in the attempt.
Yes, and no male has ever survived it.
But Paul drinks it. And he falls into a profound, near-fatal coma for weeks. But when he finally transmutes the poison and awakens, the final door has just been kicked open. His full prescient ability awakens.
His consciousness expands exponentially. He can now see the past flawlessly, he can observe the present across the universe, and most importantly, he can see the vast, branching, infinite paths of the future based on every conceivable decision made in the present.
He gains the omniscience of a god.
He does. But the universe demands a toll. Almost immediately after he ascends to this state, a raid by Harkonnen and Carino forces strikes the deep desert sanctuaries, and during the chaos, Paul's infant son, Leto, is killed.
And the loss of his son just breaks something fundamental inside Paul. That hesitant, cautious boy trying to thread the needle to avoid war, he vanishes.
Completely gone.
All of his restraint about using the Freeman fanaticism as a weapon evaporates in the face of that grief and the stark clarity of his new visions.
He stops trying to dodge the conflict. He fully embraces his role as the ultimate Fremen warlord. Under the banner of Muad'Dib, Paul leads the Fremen in a total, overwhelming planetary assault.
Using atomic weapons to blast a hole in the shield wall, they infiltrate the capital city of Arrakeen on the backs of giant sandworms, which is just an incredible image.
It's iconic. And through sheer ferocity and his prescient tactical brilliance, they utterly annihilate both the Harkonnen forces and the supposedly invincible Sardaukar of the Emperor.
But the way he ultimately secures power isn't just about winning a ground battle. It's a masterclass in cosmic leverage. He doesn't just hold Arrakis hostage, he holds the fabric of the entire interstellar civilization hostage.
He threatens the Spacing Guild.
Right.
The guild relies entirely on the spice. Their navigators use limited prescience granted by the spice to find safe paths through folded space. Without it, interstellar travel ceases to exist.
The trade stops. The Empire crumbles into isolated, starving pockets.
Exactly. So Paul looks at the guild agents and tells them that if the Emperor does not surrender the throne, Paul will trigger a chain reaction that destroys the source of the spice on Arrakis forever.
It's the ultimate checkmate. The Emperor is completely paralyzed. He surrenders. And to legitimize the transition of power, Paul demands a political marriage to the Emperor's eldest daughter, Princess Irulan. He then exiles the defeated Emperor to a harsh prison planet. Paul has won.
He has won the throne, yeah, but at an unimaginable cost.
Which brings us to the core philosophical paradox of the entire saga. Look at the sheer irony here. Paul literally drinks a lethal poison to gain the mental processing power to navigate a path that avoids a bloody, holy war.
Right.
But the exact second he acquires that power and the throne, he becomes the absolute warlord who launches the very war he hated. So, is seeing the future actually a superpower?
Yeah.
Or is it a psychological trap?
That's the million-dollar question.
Does absolute foresight just force you to walk a path you despise because you can mathematically prove every other path is worse?
Well, this is where we have to dive into the quantum mechanics of prescience in this universe. Because seeing the future is not like looking at a movie screen. The act of observation is participatory.
How do you mean?
Seeing a specific future begins to lock you into that timeline. The wave function of reality collapses around the observer. When Paul awakened fully from the water of life, he didn't just see the jihad, he saw something far more terrifying. A concept referred to as the golden path.
Okay, so let's break down the golden path because it's really the engine driving his nightmare. What exactly did he see?
He saw that humanity, spread across millions of worlds, had become stagnant. They were entirely dependent on a single resource, the spice, and ruled by rigid, unyielding structures. He looked into the deep future and saw that this stagnation led to an inevitable, absolute extinction of the human race.
Humanity would just end.
Exactly. The Golden Path was a realization that to save the human species from itself, terrible, horrific sacrifices were required in the present. Sacrifices to force a chaotic, violent evolution and scatter humanity so far they could never be controlled or hunted to extinction again.
And Paul sees what this golden path demands of him personally, physically, and morally, and he flinches.
He flinches. Because he is profoundly human. He cannot bear the personal sacrifice the Golden Path requires. He refuses to lose his humanity to save the species.
So he desperately chooses the path of least immediate destruction for himself and his loved ones. He tries to thread a microscopic needle through time.
But paradoxically, by trying to control the outcome and avoid the worst-case scenario of extinction, his very presence, his very existence as the Emperor mandates that the massive bloody jihad sweeps across the universe anyway.
He couldn't stop the Holy War.
No, he merely aimed it, hoping to limit the casualties.
Wow. Which hurls us 12 years into the future. Paul has claimed the throne. He is the undisputed emperor of the known universe. But he quickly discovers that having absolute control over reality is completely, utterly isolating.
12 years of the jihad have passed. The death toll is incomprehensible. Billions upon billions of people have been slaughtered. Entire planets have been sterilized of life just for resisting the religion of Muad'Dib.
And the Fremen have mutated. The noble desert survivors fighting for their freedom have morphed into fanatical zealots.
They worship Paul with a terrifying, unyielding fervor. The state and the church are identical now. Anyone who dissents, anyone who questions the divine right of Paul Atreides is executed by his priests.
And Paul is completely alienated from his own humanity. His oldest friends, his remaining family, they look at him with a mixture of awe and sheer horror.
They cannot understand why a man who was raised with Atreides' honor, a man who knows the intimate pain of oppression, would unleash legions to commit such atrocities.
Because they lack his prescient vision.
Exactly. They can't see the cosmic extinction he is trying to gently steer away from. They only see the oceans of blood on his hands.
So, to assuage his own guilt, or maybe as a small concession to the Freeman dream, Paul accelerates this massive ecological project. He begins terraforming Arrakis.
He starts altering the climate, trying to turn the harsh, brutal desert back into a green, lush planet, intending to maintain only a small, strictly controlled desert region just to keep spice production barely functioning.
But absolute tyrannical power breeds absolute, unprecedented resentment. The universe pushes back, a massive conspiracy forms against him, and the alliances are just staggering.
Oh yeah, everyone teams up. The Bene Gesserit, furious that their 1,000-year genetic program was hijacked and ruined. The Tleilaxu, masters of biological manipulation and cloning. The Spacing Guild, terrified and angry over his monopoly on their lifeline. And the bitter remnants of the Corino Empire.
But wait, I have to ask. How on earth do you successfully plot an assassination against a man who can literally see the future? Like, if he knows every move before you make it, how can a conspiracy even hold a meeting?
Well, it requires exploiting the mechanics of prescience itself. The conspirators use a Spacing Guild navigator, because navigators also consume massive quantities of spice to achieve a limited, specialized prescient vision to steer ships. Their presence creates a mathematical disruption in the timeline.
Oh, I see.
Think of it like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Two prescient beings looking at the same future create a prescient blind spot. Paul cannot see the details of the conspiracy's meetings when a navigator is in the room. They are hidden in a temporal shadow.
Operating out of that shadow, the conspiracy strikes a devastating physical blow. During an attack on the Capitol, a device called a stone burner is detonated. It's essentially an atomic weapon tailored to emit a specific radiation that instantly destroys human eyes.
And Paul survives the blast, but his eyes are burned out of his skull. He is completely, permanently blinded.
But here's where Paul's powers transition from awe-inspiring to deeply unsettling. Because Fremen law dictates that a blind man must be abandoned in the desert to die. But Paul does not stumble. He stands up, he walks, he talks, and he fights as if he has perfect crystal clear vision.
Right.
How is that even possible without eyes?
Because he has perfectly locked his mind into a single, continuous, prescient vision of the present and the future. He is surrendered to a specific timeline.
He essentially memorizes the spatial trajectory of reality.
Yeah.
But the psychological cost of that is unfathomable. By doing this, he becomes a total, absolute prisoner of destiny.
Yes.
He knows exactly what everyone is going to say before their lips even move. He knows where every grain of sand is falling. He surrenders all spontaneity, all free will, to perfectly act out the timeline that ensures the absolute minimum number of casualties from the conspiracy.
It's mind-bending. Let's really pull on this thread for a second. Imagine the psychological torture. It is exactly like reading the script to a movie you're starring in, and you hate the dialogue, you despise the ending, you know your character's arc is miserable and ends in tragedy.
But you still have to act it out.
You still have to step on set every single day and say every single line perfectly, exactly on cue, with the exact right inflection, forever.
Why doesn't he just break the script?
Yeah.
Like, why surrender his free will to a vision?
Because if he deviates from the script, the chaos that ensues results in exponentially worse outcomes. Remember the golden path and remember his terror of it.
Right.
Paul has seen that the alternative to this terrible, rigid, agonizing script is a timeline where humanity is completely wiped out, or one where the bloodshed of the jihad is magnified 100-fold. He makes a conscious, grueling choice to endure immense personal misery to prevent absolute universal collapse.
And his personal misery is vast. He's trapped in a political, loveless marriage with Princess Irulan. He feels absolutely nothing for her, yet she is desperate, constantly maneuvering for an heir to secure her own power.
Meanwhile, his true love, Chani, the only person who anchors his humanity, is struggling desperately to conceive an heir for him, her body failing under mysterious circumstances.
Adding to the psychological warfare, the Tleilaxu present Paul with a deeply cruel, twisted gift. They give him a Gola, a biologically resurrected clone grown from the dead cells of his fallen mentor and closest friend, Duncan Idaho.
The clone is named Hate, and he possesses no memories of his past life.
It's a profound trap. The Tleilaxu have secretly implanted this clone with a hypnotic trigger word. Deep in his subconscious, when the specific word is spoken, the clone will involuntarily assassinate Paul.
And Paul knows this. Because of his visions, he sees the trap clearly. But he is so profoundly lonely, so starved for a genuine connection to his past, to his humanity before he became a god, that he keeps the clone near him anyway.
It paints the ultimate portrait of a lonely god. He's sitting on a throne surrounded by hidden assassins, fanatical zealots, and political fighters, navigating a physical darkness of his own choosing, waiting for the one massive event his visions could not perfectly clarify.
Which is where the myth finally, spectacularly unravels. Paul's rigid, suffocating control over his prescribed future shatters. And it shatters because biology, the very thing the Bene Gesserit sought to control, creates a blind spot that his infinite visions simply couldn't penetrate.
The conspiracy's most insidious layer was actually inside Paul's own household. Princess Irulan, acting on strict, unyielding orders from the Bene Gesserit, have been secretly slipping highly complex contraceptives and mild poisons into Chani's food for years.
The sisterhood wanted to ensure Paul's genetic line ended, or at least control it through Irulan.
But Chani's biology, combined with a specialized Fremen diet, finally overcomes the poisons. She gets pregnant. However, the physiological toll on her body is just too immense. She goes into premature labor and tragically dies giving birth, but she doesn't just have one child.
No, she has twins, a boy, Leto II, and a girl, Ghanima.
This is the exact moment Paul's prescience completely, irreversibly breaks down. In all his rigid, perfect visions, in all the timelines he memorized to walk blindly through the world, he only foresaw a daughter. He never saw the son.
And why? Because of the mechanics of prescience we discussed earlier, the infant Leto II is uniquely altered. Because of Chani's massive spice diet during the pregnancy, Leto is born fully awakened.
He's prescient too.
Exactly. He is a Kwisatz Haderach in his own right, possessing the exact same prescient powers as his father, and beings with prescience mathematically block the visions of other prescient beings. Leto's very existence cast a temporal shadow that hid him from Paul's sight.
So, in the absolute crushing chaos and grief of Chani's sudden death, the conspiracy makes its final, desperate move. A Tleilaxu agent, a shape-shifting face dancer named Scytale, springs the trap. He speaks the trigger word, activating the Duncan Idaho clone to assassinate the grieving, distracted, and now truly blind Paul.
But here, the central theme of the entire saga violently reasserts itself. Human emotion triumphs over genetic programming. Duncan's deep, latent love, his profound loyalty for the Atreides and for Paul specifically, creates such massive, unbearable psychological conflict within the clone that it literally rewires his brain. He regains his original memories of Duncan Idaho in a flash of trauma, overrides his Tleilaxu conditioning, and stops his own blade, saving Paul's life.
Seeing the assassination completely fail, Scytale pivots instantly to psychological warfare. He offers Paul the ultimate, horrific temptation. The Tleilaxu have just proven they can restore the memories of the dead in a Gola.
So Scytale tells Paul, Abdicate the throne, surrender the entire empire, give us the power, and we will create a Gola of Chani for you. We will bring the love of your life back.
Think about the weight of that offer. For a man who has sacrificed his entire life, his morality, and his humanity for the universe, the temptation to finally choose his own selfish personal happiness is just overwhelming.
But Paul recognizes the trap. A Gola of Chani would be a hostage forever. So he draws on his last reservoir of strength, uses the psychic connection with his prescient infant son to, quote-unquote, see the room, and throws a knife, killing Scytale.
The conspiracy is broken, but the victory is entirely hollow. The love of his life is dead on the floor. His prescient vision, the crutch he used to rule the universe without eyes, has collapsed entirely because of the twins. He is now truly, physically, temporally, and spiritually blind.
So he makes a final, shocking, narrative-breaking decision. He abdicates the Golden Throne. Following the ancient, brutal laws of the freeman culture he adopted, a blind man is a burden to the tribe and must return his water to the desert.
He chooses to walk out into the deep, scorching sands alone, offering himself to be consumed by Shai-Hulud, the giant sandworms. He leaves his young, unstable sister Aelia to rule as regent for his infant children.
To everyone in the universe, the story ends there. Paul Atreides is dead. The myth is complete. The martyr has ascended. The religion is cemented forever.
But years later, a mysterious figure emerges from the deep desert into the capital city. An old, completely blind man, dressed in rags. He calls himself the Preacher.
The Preacher travels to the steps of the massive temples built in his own honor and begins openly, violently inciting civil disobedience against his own sister, Alia.
Because Alias has taken the empire Paul reluctantly built and turned it into an absolute corrupt, nightmarish religious bureaucracy. Worse, the trauma of her preborn existence being awakened to genetic memory in the womb has allowed the vicious, sociopathic genetic memory of the evil Baron Harkonnen to literally possess her mind from the inside.
The Preacher is, of course, Paul Atreides. He survived the deep desert, but he has returned with a singular purpose: to tear down everything he built.
He preaches viciously against the ecological transformation of Arrakis, warning the Fremen that a green, lush dune means the death of the sandworms, which means the death of the spice and the death of their culture. He rails against the corrupt priesthood that worships him as a god.
He eventually reunites with his son, Leto II, who is now coming of age. And in that reunion out in the desert, we get the most heartbreaking, profound confession of the entire story.
Yeah.
Paul admits to his son that he saw the golden path clearly. He saw that to truly save humanity from stagnation and extinction, a ruler would have to enforce a forced, brutal peace for millennia. To do that, the ruler would have to physically merge with the sand trout, the larval stage of the sandworms, and mutate into a lonely, immortal, grotesque worm god.
And Paul confesses with brutal honesty that he was simply too cowardly to accept that physical and emotional sacrifice. He couldn't bear to lose his human form, his ability to love, his connection to humanity.
He chose to let the jihad rage rather than walk the golden path. But his son Leto, possessing the same visions, accepts the terrible burden his father refused. Leto begins the biological transformation.
With his son now locked onto the path he so desperately avoided, Paul accompanies Leto for one final public act. They go to the Great Plaza in the capital to expose Olia's possession and corruption to the fanatical masses.
And during the ensuing riot, standing in the shadow of his own massive, gaudy statues, Paul Atreides is stabbed to death by Alia's fanatical priests.
He dies a pathetic, tragic, bloody death on the street, only revealing his true identity to the royal family as he draws his last breath.
It is an incredibly jarring, almost anticlimactic end to a hero of his magnitude.
I think it really demands an explanation. Because looking at it, he spends the first half of his life building an inescapable, godlike myth, and he spends his retirement trying to vandalize his own statues. It feels like a massive undoing of his character. I mean, did he actually accomplish anything, or was he just a flawed, failed prototype for his son?
Well, the underlying mechanism of his ending isn't an undoing. It is the ultimate fulfillment of the story's core, vital message. Paul Atreides is the definitive, glaring cautionary tale against charismatic leaders. He wasn't a failure, but rather a profoundly, stubbornly human being who hit the absolute breaking limit of what a human soul could sacrifice. He realized the infinite horror of the religious bureaucracy he had unleashed, and he chose to die as a mortal, bleeding man on the pavement, tearing down his own false divinity, rather than become the immortal, tyrannical monster the universe technically needed to survive. He chose his humanity over his godhood, even knowing it would cost him his empire, his legacy, and his life.
That brings us to our final thought. We've explored the arrogant genetics, the weaponization of myth, the suffocating traps of prescience, and the lonely, bleeding end of a manufactured god. But there is a lingering, heavy question here that I want you, the listener, to mull over as you go about your day.
Considering everything we've unpacked about the mechanics of prescience, about how seeing the future mathematically locks you into a specific timeline, collapsing the probabilities, ask yourself this. Did Paul Atreides ever actually make a single choice of his own free will after he drank the water of life?
Or is the ultimate cosmic curse of absolute knowledge realizing that you are no longer the author of your own story, but simply a captive audience forced to watch the playing out of your own life?
It's a heavy, deeply unsettling thought to leave you with, but that's exactly why we dive into these narratives.
If you found this deep dive as fascinating as we did, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment below. We really want to know. What do you think about Paul's choices? Did he have free will, or was he just a victim of his own foresight? Share this with anyone who loves a universe full of stories.
Knowledge is most valuable when it challenges our assumptions. Always consider the mechanisms behind the myths.
Keep questioning the stories you were told, and keep looking for the complex truth behind the simple heroes. Because as we saw today, sometimes the comfort of a clean, clear, predictable hero's journey is just an illusion hiding a much murkier, much more dangerous reality. See you next time.